All right. Well, welcome back to Wisdom and Wanderlust, everyone. My name is Michael Bennett, co-founder of ExploreX, and on behalf of the entire ExploreX team, including Robin and Amanda and Fred, we are really, really glad that you're here with us today for our conversation with our good friend, Whelan. We're going to have a chance to talk to Court in just a few minutes about his work in conservation travel, his passion for photography, and really the intersection of travel, photography, and conservation. So we're really, really excited to dive into that with Court in just a few minutes. Before we get started, a few notes for you. If you are new to the ExploreX travel community, welcome. You can learn much more about who we are, what we do, and what makes us so special on our website, www.explorer-x.com. We recently launched a brand new and spectacular membership program, which has lots of benefits, incentives, discounts, deals, and all kinds of other really amazing things for our members. So learn more about that on our website. There's a membership link at the top where you can go to explorer-x.com/join. And as always, we love talking to our travelers. So whether you have a question about travel, a question about your hero's journey and where you're at right now in life and how travel might be able to support you in your own personal journey of learning and growth, or you just want to say hi to us, please feel free to reach out to us by email at hello@explorer-x.com. Lastly, you can follow us on all of our social media channels at GoExploreX.
Great. I have a few housekeeping items for everyone. We're going to keep this as close to an hour as possible, although it's an exciting chat today, so we'll see how that goes. We are recording and it will be available afterward. We'll email everyone a link. And if you have any questions as we go along today's conversation, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen and we will answer questions throughout today's conversation.
Awesome. And I'm going to chime in here and start us off with a question of the week for our team. So this week's question is, what's one of your favorite photography moments you've had while traveling? And maybe Amanda, I'll start with you.
I'm kind of cheating because I have it right behind me. Something is just absolutely special about Botswana. It's one of my absolute favorite places in the world. And there's just so much wildlife and scenery and everything's just wonderful. And one day we were driving along and their trees were off in the distance and our guide all of a sudden got really excited. And we couldn't see anything. The trees were so far off in the distance, but he left the path and drove up to the trees and we found this beautiful leopard just sitting there. And we sat there and watched forever and got some amazing photos. And it was just a really cool experience just sitting there and watching it sit in the tree and just nonchalant, having a casual relax. And it was just really incredible. But Botswana is special. So there's lots of wildlife all around. So, but that moment with the leopard was pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I may have shared this story before, but I'll share it again because it's one of my favorites. I was in Switzerland in 2013 and was in the Jungfrau region, Lauterbrunnen Valley, going on a hike, and I sort of came to this intersection. It was kind of funny, but I came to this intersection where it said, I was going back down to the town of Lauterbrunnen. I was up near Wengen. And I was sort of making my way back down. I got to an intersection. It said, Lauterbrunnen right, an hour, and Lauterbrunnen left 2.5 hours. And so I was like, all right, well, I was kind of getting hungry and all this other stuff, but whatever. Long story short, I ended up going the long way. And thank goodness I did, because I took a left, and about 5 minutes later, the trees cleared and I got this ridiculous view of the three peaks, Eigermonk and Jungfrau. This was in August, so the snow was melting. There were waterfalls over the place. There were cows in this pasture right just to my left, and the bells are clanging and they're grazing. And I literally sat down for 3 hours. I could not do anything but just sit there and just admire the beauty. And I tried to take pictures of it, and they came out awesome. But even that is still a fraction of what it was like to be there, and the beauty of that setting. And actually grab my journal as living what we preach, right? And and took a lot of notes. And I still have that journal with me in my desk here, and I go back to it often, refer to it often for inspiration. And when I start to feel a little bit confused or stuck or whatever it might be, you know, I kind of go back into that because there's so much clarity came through that experience. So anyway.
Yeah, sounds amazing. I think we're kind of covering all the bases here with the wildlife and the scenery, and I'm going to talk about the people. So in my experience, what comes to mind for me is like a memorable photography experience I've had is when I was in on the western border of Tanzania, visiting this small village of Katumbi, and we were visiting some schools, and the kids ended up kind of being our local tour guides and like grabbing our hands and taking us all around the village. And they saw that I had a camera, and they wanted to be in all the photos. They wanted to be with me in the photos. And so I just have this slew of photos of all these adorable children, and they just loved seeing their faces on the little display screen on my camera. And I got some like really like hilarious and great shots through that.
Awesome. Yeah. Of course, I think for all of us, one of our favorite things to do when we travel is to focus on photography. And, you know, it always, at least for me, and I think for most of us, it brings us back to those moments. And it's not just about the beauty of what we're seeing, you know, externally, but it really, it brings us back to the feeling and the emotions and things that we were experiencing, the joy of the kids, right? The sense of, space and place and sort of connection you may have had with the leopard, right? And just the connection to the waterfalls, the cows, and everything else that I felt. So awesome. Well, we're gonna dive into our conversation with Court here. Just a quick bio, and Court, I hate to generally do this, but it's a pretty quick one here. So I'm going to read through this, and then I'll let you do your bio much more justice. But Court is an expedition leader who guides people to all ends of the earth and everywhere in between, sharing the beauty of our planet with his travelers. In addition to guiding, Court works very, very closely with the World Wildlife Fund in the U.S. to bring passionate supporters to the places that the WWF works to safeguard and protect for generations to come. He's also just a good friend, a mentor, a colleague, and someone that we have started working closely with, and very, very much look forward to working with as we continue to grow out our little traveler community. So Court, welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, and hello, everyone.
So Court, tell us a little bit now about what you've been up to, how you've been managing and dealing with COVID and that.
Yeah, well, I've been up to, fortunately, staying pretty busy. There's all sorts of things I like to, get myself into. Photography is a never-ending pursuit, and it's a heck of a lot of time to process photos. And one thing a real delight I didn't expect is that, as you get newer cameras, you kind of take better and better photos throughout the years. As you go forward on your own journey, you get better. And I'm looking back on some old photos that I can actually access the raw files and reprocess them with kind of new eyes, new crops, new composition. And I'm having a ball because it's photos I took a decade ago that I've totally forgot about. I've just been looking for, certain photos of this one scene I remember, and I find 10 more photos that are just absolute gems. So that's been a really fun thing. Other than that, I enjoyed the 1 week of fall that we've had here in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm looking at snow on the mountains in the distance right now, and we're going to get some tonight, I think. And we'll see how the winter goes. But it's an interesting time for travel and those that like to travel right now. So just kind of keeping my mind immersed in it in any way I can, but mostly digitally right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've spent quite a bit of time over the past, what's it been, 7 months or 8 months now with the pandemic, reflecting and going back, right? So you're doing it through photography among other forms and platforms and ways. And certainly for us, it's been a nice break to step back and get creative and reinvent things and go back to, not photography, but I've gone back to old journals, and rereading books that I've read, a decade ago, and sort of picking them back up and re-immersing myself in that and continuing to get more out of it, much like you're sort of, revisiting and revising some of the photography. So awesome. So tell us more about where you come from in terms of your path and and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's been an interesting journey. I've been in the world of travel for going on about 20 years now. I started in the academic realm, but as far as kind of my initial aha moment, that happened about 20 years ago in Belize. I, as a kid, was not really traveling. My family, we weren't the people that went on safaris and whatnot. It would have been great, but we just didn't. So I caught my real first kind of travel bug, so to speak, when I was studying entomology, pun intended, I suppose, reverse pun. And I took this internship with actually a friend of the family that did own a very small little travel business, and she led high schoolers in Belize. And I always heard about that growing up, and I was studying entomology, and I was really into like the tropical bugs, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I'd like to go see these crazy butterflies and moths and beetles. And so I went and kind of paid my way as an intern, and now that trip was really what did it all for me. I went ahead of time to get a lay of the land. It kind of coincided with my spring break. And I remember being in the Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Reserve, which is the first, and for many years, maybe still like the only true jaguar reserve in Central America, if not all the Americas. And I was kind of on my own. I was backpacking. I was green. I didn't know what I was doing. I just jumped in. And it was a very, as we talk about experiential travel, it was a very immersive experience. I was in there. I was in the forest. I had to make my own fun. I would follow leafcutter ants around the jungle for hours just because I wanted to see where they were going. And there was some sort of that triggered me to be like, this is a really interesting way to look at the world. Kind of slow down, be a little bit more deep in it. And then the next couple of weeks, I got to guide these high schoolers that equally didn't know much about travel or tropical biology or anything. And it was this moment I said, this travel, this idea, and this is 20 years ago, ecotourism was barely even a household word. This idea of ecotourism is what's going to save the world. I think it's one of the most powerful ways to incentivize conservation, get people to learn about stuff, bring money to local communities via tourism, and in essence, increase the value of these natural areas and the wildlife that is within. And so that moment was it. I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then just through a cascade of kind of hard work and a lot of luck and fortunate events, I grew a little travel program out of the University of Florida. I started studying and ended up getting my master's and PhD in ecotourism within the entomology department, an unlikely marriage there. But it got me to really understand a lot about how the world works. And through more and more serendipity and more hard work, I just sort of climbed the ranks and now get to guide worldwide on all 7 continents and trying to save the world one trip at a time.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's an amazing story. I maybe not for nothing, but like what led you to your passion for bugs, slimy things, and leaf cutter ants?
Yeah. So again, like I actually wasn't one of those like bug kids. I didn't like have like a huge collection of bugs. That's not what I would mainly do. But I was at, again, University of Florida. I was I was definitely first year of undergrad studying everything. I didn't declare a major. I was studying oceanography and philosophy and macroeconomics and all that. And lo and behold, I needed my biology credit, and I took an entomology course, Bugs 101, so to speak. And after the end of the first year, you kind of have to declare a major. They make you. I was like, well, that's kind of the thing that I like learning about most. It's the one class I really, really look forward to, learning how honeybees communicate and learning about the eusociality of termites and, even the more creepy crawly of bugs. It was really interesting. And then I think the big connection that happened that, kind of kept me in it throughout the years is when you learn insects, when you learn a lot about insects, they're so integral in the way the world works. And it's kind of versatile. Like when you understand, if you've ever heard of like the trophic pyramid, like all of life, you have like the plants and then the things that eat the plants and then the things that eat the plants, and it goes all the way up to like the wolves and the pumas. Bugs are kind of like right there in the center. And so you learn everything. You get to learn about the plants, you get to learn about the soils, you get to learn about the ecosystems, you get to learn about the things like the birds and the reptiles. And so it just kind of kept me very curious, because I'm a very much generalist when it comes to nature and wildlife and all that. Like, you can probably pin me down and get me to name my favorite bug or my favorite animal, but I like it all, and I like it all a lot. And yeah, so like the more I learned, I definitely became a bug nerd because they're fascinating. And I think that's one of the things I love most about what I'm able to do is I'm able to uncover, this this Attenborough-esque life in the undergrowth with my guests. There's always gonna be a bug around. There's always gonna be something interesting going on that most people just walk right over or don't stop to look at. But, they're not the biggest, they're not the most charismatic, but the life history, like the details behind what they're doing is some of the most fascinating in the world. Like for leafcutter ants, they really discovered farming about 1 million years before humans did. And they've been farmers of little subterranean fungus ever since. And like, had we been able to look at those guys and learn from them, it's really interesting, how much we can still learn from these little critters. And I think that's kept me very, very much engaged.
I love it. So I'll put you on the spot. What is your favorite bug?
Oh, okay. I'm going to give you two. One, I'm going to have to say,
we'll
start off with this is the easy one, the Monarch Butterfly. That's the one that I studied quite a bit of for my dissertation, both the ecotourism as well as the biology. And mainly it's migration. So this is one of the only butterflies that migrate, and it's actually one of the longest migrations in the animal kingdom, about 3,000 miles every year, the same butterfly. You may have heard about it, you may have seen it. It's like Discovery Channel kind of stuff. I'm pretty enamored with it and its biology and how it's able to live so long and how it's able to navigate, never before having been to these sanctuaries in central Mexico, all with a brain the size, a central ganglion, the size of a grain of sand. And it's amazing, what its genetics can do. So that's the easy one.
Let me ask you a quick question. Are there any good books about monarch butterflies that you might recommend?
Oh, geez. Funny you should ask. I know a guy that just published one, this guy. So I did publish, I'll say it's my first book because I hope to have more out there at some point. But yeah, for those interested in the monarch butterfly migration, this is sort of a photographic atlas, a coffee table book with lots of fun, easily digestible scientific information about what the heck is going on with this migration. It's about 20 years of photos down there. And I thought appropriate to collect them in about 160 pages, available on Amazon. I think it's Prime Day.
Well, when we send out our follow-up email, we'll be sure to include a link in that as well.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. All right. So your second favorite.
Second one, this is I got to go to the other extreme example. Monarchs, it's like, I think it's literally the world's most well-known butterfly. So I'm going to go for one of the least known critters. And this is, you're just going to have to Google search it, but it's the Madagascar giraffe-necked weevil. And I just like to look at these guys. They have a very interesting life history as well, how they're, these long giraffe-like necks, about 3 times the length of the body, but they're only about the size of your thumbnail. They perch on leaves. They have this bright red body. They're beautiful little critters, extremely photogenic. And they just kind of represent the other side of the insect world, the weird, the wacky, the intriguing, and the beautiful. So I think maybe between the number 1 and number 2, I cover all my bases.
I love it. The two extremes.
Right.
So I want to go back. You mentioned several experiences that sort of paved the way from, where you were in terms of studying bugs and entomology to current day conservation. Are there any people and or experiences that really highlight, or have really shaped your journey and helped you become who you are today?
Yeah, all of them. I honestly, like, I think everybody that I've met along the way, every person that's gave me a chance, every person that I've interacted with, whether it's just a quick collaboration on a certain study or a certain paper, I think that oftentimes, we like to think of, those closest to us probably had the most influence. And that's certainly the case. People like my mom and my wife and my great friends and great colleagues and coworkers throughout the years. It would be a really exhaustive list to name all that. But I think, maybe the takeaway is that every single person plays a purpose and a point in life, I think. And I think that's exceedingly true of travel. I mean, if I stop to try to think of every person I met along every trip and every guest that I had, it would take me years. But in the moment, that every single connection you make, every story you hear from a indigenous person in the Amazon, from every gaucho you meet in Patagonia, they're all very important. And they teach you something about yourself and the world that, it's hard to get in any other way, which is one of the many reasons why I'm so passionate about travel.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we think about, some of the right, parents, teachers, people that actually have played a formal or informal mentorship role in our lives, right? And how they've helped us emerge, right, in Monarch Butterfly into the people we are today. And yet there's also those interactions with the people whose names we'll never know, right? And whose faces we'll forget, in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And yet one conversation or one comment, right, one interaction, even without words, can have a huge impact on our understanding of ourselves, as you said, our understanding of other people, cultures, the world, and life, right? And this is the beauty of travel, right? This is what we get out of it so much.
Yeah, totally. Like we in our present day selves are that memory and that collection of experiences, and we have more wisdom because of it, because of all those interactions. And actually, this is something that just kind of an interesting analogy. It might be a little bit deep, but one of the main things that I'm after is conserving biodiversity. Biodiversity is a collection of all present day life on Earth, the diversity of life, which allows ecosystems to flourish and nutrients to recycle and water to be clean and blah, blah, blah. And, we often talk about the reason that we need that so much is the genetic memory, because the present day life has evolved over hundreds of millions of years. And we have the best form of that critter, that plant, that animal, whatever, with the genetic memory. And it's almost like a parallel to how we in our present day form, like it's so important to be present because we have this amazing collective memory from all of our experiences. I don't know. We could go way deeper on that, but it's just something that like popped in my brain. Parallel.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I've been reading a lot of books lately where they sort of reflect on the exponential growth, in terms of technology and agriculture and everything that we've, as a species, we've experienced over the past 12,000 years, right? And how, we consume more data in one day than our ancestors consumed in their lifetimes, right? And how that has negatively impacted our, attention and capacity for being present and all of those things, right? And we're constantly fighting this sort of genetic experience that we all have had for millions of years, and yet we're being bombarded with stuff. And it really leads to sort of a sense of fragmentation, right? And I know I always feel like I'm like running from one call to one meeting to this and to that. And where do you actually focus and do really good quality work and settle down and be quiet and find solitude and find meaning and,
Yep.
to get cheesy and whatever, like listen to your heart and talk to your soul and all of those things. We don't get a chance to do that these days.
Yeah.
Or not enough anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. All right. So you mentioned conservation. Obviously, this is one of the focal points of our conversation today. How do you define conservation? What are the different forms of conservation?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know if I've defined it quite like that in quite some time. I mean, I think modern day conservation, my sense of it is very coupled with sustainability. The idea is that really, if we want to get kind of scientific, is we want to slow the rate of change in today's world. That's really the thing. We want to slow the rate of change, meaning as we, building roads is fine. Mining materials out of mountains is fine. Like the reason we got here is because of some of these things. I mean, they're not inherently bad, but the rate of change is difficult for the world to adapt to, is plain and simple. If you look back in the last 1 billion years of life on Earth, we've gone through a lot of major changes, 5+ major ice ages. The climate has warmed considerably, way warmer than we're predicting it to warm in this present sort of Holocene, Anthropocene kind of time, the present day. But it's the rate that it's changing that the animals and plants can adapt to. And maybe more importantly, we are going to have a hard time adapting to. Let's not forget, like we're kind of under a little bit of self-preservation. So I think conservation is really, understanding the priorities of what makes the world work. What are the most important things out there? And we're finding it's actually not necessarily, the rhino that's the most important, or the giraffe-necked weevil that's most important. It's the collection of it all. It's this general idea of biodiversity that there's a level of redundancy where if something changes, something else can fulfill that niche. So I think, maybe a great way to think about it, and again, great question, is understanding and dealing with the rate of change in a better way that we can keep the world intact in its present day form as long as we can. Change is inevitable, but understanding the rate of change that we currently have and trying to mirror what the world is used to, I think is key.
So
Good
yeah,
question.
100%. So there's so much, right? The interconnectivity of all of this, right? And you go back to your, I forget the name of the pyramid, I apologize, but the bugs being in the middle of it, right? You know, and the
Yeah,
bugs,
yeah, like the
right.
trophic cascade, exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So a term that's been coming up a lot lately, you know, we have it on our website and people are talking about it a ton, is regenerative travel. So how do you differentiate regenerative travel or whatever versus sustainability versus conservation? And I guess another question embedded in that is like, do we actually want to conserve the world that we live in now, or do we need to really get it back to where it was 50 or 100 or 200 years ago?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a great question. I mean, there's a it's a heavily paraphrased quote from Charles Darwin, but it is not the strongest nor the most intelligent species that survives, but those most adaptable to change. Change is indeed inevitable. It's going to change for one way or another, and I think that part of our challenge today is to adapt to the change. I think one of the big cutting edge things that a lot of the leading conservation organizations are doing is being like, dude, climate change is going to happen. We're going to see a half a degree or a degree. Like, even if we stopped all deleterious activities right away, we stopped them all, there's enough momentum. So part of this adaptation, but I do think that we have to, if we're going to keep things as they are now, we're going to have to like shoot for the stars and land on a mountain. So we're gonna have to aim for reversing ourselves, like 50 years or 100 years or whatever, pre-industrial revolution, and knowing that that's a tall order, be happy when we just keep things pretty static and pretty constant. But it's hard to do so. It's certainly hard to do so. I mean, things are going to change. We also can't deny the majority of the world from becoming a quote unquote developed nation and increasing in their prosperity and progress. So it's this extraordinary balancing act. And I think maybe a different way to answer the conservation question, what does it mean, is trying to have, minimal impact, minimizing your impact, or minimizing your negative impact, maximizing your positive impact. And I think when it comes to travel, one of the kind of hot topics is this idea of, carbon emissions, and a lot of people, especially in Europe, in the last couple of years, were doing some travel shaming and that sort of thing. And I couldn't disagree more, but it's key that yes, anything you do is going to have an impact in the world. And yeah, when we travel, we get in cars, and we go to work, we get in cars or trains or planes or whatever. But I think the mission is that, can you offset that impact with more positive impact? And the way that we do it in the world of conservation travel, or, I would think with like this idea of transformative travel or regenerative travel, is that we are investing, basically bringing money to a lot of these local communities that are able to then place value on the cultural wonders they have, on the art they have, on the landscapes they have, which may be looked at as having a different value if it's right on a river that can have a dam on it, or on a mountain that can be mined, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the idea of having positive impact in travel is something that we all have to kind of consciously think about day to day, trip to trip, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this next wave of travel, this more immersive travel, is a real cornerstone to expressing and kind of normalizing that tremendous positive impact travel can have on people, places, wildlife, you name it.
Yeah, one of the things I've wrestled with, and I was just talking to Jake, my business partner here at ExploreX and co-founder of the TTC as well. Yesterday, we were talking about this is, how do we maximize the benefit to some of these local communities while also ensuring the conservation and the continuation of their culture, right? The preservation of their cultures. We don't want it to be bastardized and sold out so that it becomes just sort of a show. Right. So any thoughts on that?
It's the $1 million question, and I don't think there's a perfect playbook. I think we have to be creative. We have to use some common sense and use some real deal genius innovation when it comes around, and think about, okay, well, what we want to do is very simple things, like ensure that, most of the money or a substantial portion of the money is going to the people that are the stakeholders. The stakeholders in community. Like if you're like, let's just use an example. If you're on a wildlife safari, let's just use like India for watching tigers. There are a lot of communities around these tiger reserves. And if you're going in and just staying at, one camp or one lodge, and it doesn't properly integrate the local communities, whether it's employing from local sources, whether it means having any sort of philanthropic efforts to local places, if you don't have some of that, you're not benefiting the people that are, again, the stakeholders. And what I mean by that is they're the people that will be the watchdogs for the poachers, for the people that want to come in and transform the landscape, put in parking lots. This is kind of metaphorical, but also kind of real. And so the people that live in the communities surrounding these national parks or cultural wonders, whatever it may be, again, have to realize, they have to see the benefits of tourism and be integrated in it as much as possible, really. So I think every person that comes along, every company that thinks about it, every guest that asks questions like, oh, well, what is your stance on that, is doing a service to this next generation, this next phase in travel.
Love it. So what are some of to get granular here, right, to get practical, what are some of the things that you look for or that you do while you're traveling that really help to minimize that negative impact and maximize the positive contribution that we can make? How do you use travel for good?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, understanding the philosophy of conservation travel, aka ecotourism, and realizing that what the benefit is you're adding value to natural ecosystems. So once again, you go to Africa, that rhino has value in a few different ways. Just to be totally transparent, it has value as bushmeat. People can eat it. It has value for poaching and rhino horns. It's got a lot of value for that. But it also, and this is where I think it has significantly more value, the most value is the value for tourism. The value for when people come and they see this rhino, they're satisfied. They came to Africa to see this rhino or this leopard or this whatever, you name it. And the idea is that that's the most valuable way to preserve the rhino, and it's the most valuable use of the rhino. And the rhino is just one example. There's a great example, and I often cite this when I'm talking about the valuation of ecotourism, an older study. Unfortunately, there are many newer ones across the world, but this is one of the first. We're going to go to the little island nation of Palau in the South Pacific, and what they usually do, what they specialize in is shark ecotourism. Everything's set up for shark diving. It's like a great population. I think it's silky sharks, and you're going to see them, and they're cool, they're interactive, they're not dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. And Australian Institute went in there, they figured out the total economic, like all the hotels, how much guides are getting paid, the dive outfitters, the airlines, the local flights, the local boats, the everything. What is all the money going to the country because of shark tourism? It's like a long 35-page paper. And then they went and figured out what's the normal population of sharks, like how many sharks live in these waters that people are seeing. And they did a bunch of fancy math, lots of stuff out there. And they figured out that the average value of each shark in that ecosystem is worth $1.9 million over the course of its lifetime. 1.9. So that's that tangible value. And then, the other value that sharks have is by fishing. And the most popular form of fishing in the Pacific, unfortunately, is shark finning, where you take the fin off. It's a delicacy.
Right.
Any guesses as to what that value is compared to $1.9 million? You take the fin off, the shark's done. You lost that value.
$100.
Yeah. $108. So what this is a very easily translatable number to local communities that, hey, listen, if this shark remains intact, it's worth $1.9 million. If you someone, you see someone going to take that shark, they just stole $1.9 million from your country and your community. And so what happens is that further motivates and further creates stakeholders to be watchdogs, to make sure it doesn't happen. And these are real numbers. This is not just hocus pocus. I mean, this is like the real deal, like lots of studies. And we have amazing facts and figures for all over the world. The value of wolf watching tourism in Yellowstone is $35.5 million a year. The value of one tiger for 1 year in India is $750,000. And the same thing
year?
Per year. So it's a renewable resource. And so the thing is, it's very abstract to think about this because people don't realize at the macro level, what this really translates to. so this underlines the point that when this money comes in, it has to find its way throughout the economy, or else it's a moot point, you know, because that person that cuts the shark fin off gets all $108. But so it has to find a way for that $1.9 million and all of its other 1,000 buddies and this many million dollar enterprise. It has to somehow reach its way through the community. And that doesn't mean that every single person in the country or the state or whatever has to be employed. It just means that that money has to stay local when possible, you know, whenever and wherever possible.
I love it. I love it. You've helped us. We've got to pay. You and Robin have worked together a bit and helped us develop a bit of a regenerative and sustainable travel page on our website, which people can check out. What other resources might you point people to that can we send and link people to so they can learn more about how to, you know, even when they're heading out, when it comes to things like packing and gear and just sort of mindset, that they can make sure that they are minimizing a negative impact and maximizing that positive contribution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we think about sustainability, it's a pretty hot topic these days, and a lot of companies that are doing sustainability like you guys, will have a page. You know, they'll have information on it. I think one of the first things to do, if there is that back and forth, you know, interaction between a guest and a company, not all companies, you know, like you can't, you know, necessarily buy a shirt from an online store like Amazon, be like, hey, what's your stance on sustainability? But for you guys, you can, you know, guests can ask like, well, what do you guys think about it? What's your position? I think asking those questions is a great way to do it. I think, you know, putting your money behind sustainable companies and sustainable products. You know, I mean, I could name brands out there. One that I particularly love for the gear, for travel, for the apparel world is Patagonia. They do things really, really well. If you're not familiar with their stance on the environment and their stance on all sorts of things, they're just a really, really great outfit, and I like to support them a lot.
Hence the shirt you're wearing right now. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, and the list is pretty long out there, but I think just starting, you know, one of the things I often say is to be in the world of sustainability, you need to kind of think sustainably. You need to be a bit like a language. You got to be fluent. You got to be thinking about it quite often. And, you know, in a world, in the future, I think that every single industry and every single section of society will have a sustainability or sustainable option. Food, building materials, apparel, fabrics, you know, you name it. There is a more sustainable way to do it. And it's a spectrum, you know, it's not like this is good and this is bad. There's a million points in between. And really, you know, I don't think we need, you know, 10 companies doing sustainability perfect. We need 1 million companies doing it imperfectly.
Love it. Yeah. And you know, Robin, I'll let you speak more to this, but it's something that we take very seriously, of course. And you know, in our infancy, and we're only 3 years old, we're starting to implement more and more with Robin's guidance and leadership, and of course, in consultation with youth, so that we can do our part, right, and help our travelers do their part to make sure that the minimizing that negative impact.
Thanks to like Court's mentorship and just the research I've done since I've been a part of the team, we've started to we'll include a link to our sustainability page as well, but we've started to incorporate more regenerative practices at ExploreX, and as well as in every trip, we donate to Sustainable Travel International, and so we're starting to incorporate more of these things as we learn and as we grow, just to help support the effort.
Court, we've got about 20 minutes left here, and I want to touch on a couple other things while we've got you. Photography is obviously a real passion of yours. Where is the intersection between photography and travel, which is sort of natural, and conservation? How do they come together for you?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, for me, the origin of it all kind of happened organically. Like I said, I got started in travel right when the time of ecotourism, this idea of conservation travel, and how we call it, was really gaining momentum. So it all kind of came together in my mind very organically. But, you know, I think the way I practice it and use it in today's world is I do think about what conservation value my photographs might have. And there's not a one size fits all answer to that. It's very subjective. You guys in the audience might have your own ideas, but it zooms out to a broader question is, you know, so you join a trip with Explorer X, and you do this great, local sustainable trip, and it's got all these right ingredients, and you've lived it for a week or 2 weeks, and that's fantastic. You get home and you've learned some lessons, but what's the future of conservation for you as a person, as a guest, as a traveler, as a steward of the earth, et cetera, et cetera? And what I often say is one of the most powerful things you can do for conservation is do what you do best and do it for conservation. And it's a very subjective thing. It's a very kind of metaphorical thing, but do what you do best and do it for conservation. So I often cite some examples like, if you're a great writer, start a blog or write to your local newspaper and write about conservation in some way, whatever topic resonates with you. If you are a great poster on social media, do that and integrate some conservation topics. And there's quite a long list. Maybe you're an activist or really, really great and you understand politics quite well. You understand local government. Do that, do it for conservation. So for me, I've taken a liking to photography for many years. And so I'm taking what I do, what I like to do best, and I try to use it for conservation. Okay. So there are many ways you can do this, but for photography, I think about, okay, well, how do I use it for conservation? I think building awareness is a great thing. You can put your photos out there, whether it's in magazines. I'm fortunate to have some photos in magazines out there, but the most readily available nowadays, which is just, looking where we've come in the last 5 to 10 years on social media, anybody can put photos out there and become a sort of instant celebrity if you do it right. And you can get heard in a very big way. Unfortunately, there are some negatives to that, and people can say what they want to say. And there are some various movements out there of not so great wildlife tourism where people are not necessarily doing the best practices. So I think as members of this sustainable community, post things, write about things, take photos of things, and have that positive conservation story. Talk about that photo that was taken in the wilds of Ranthambore National Park in India. Talk about that leopard and that journey that you got to see it in Botswana, like Amanda was saying, and somehow tie in that conservation value. So again, there's no perfect roadmap. Maybe in the coming years there will be as we explore this more. But I think the idea of conservation photography is using your photography for the good of conservation. You can take it to the extreme example and you can own a gallery and you can showcase your photos and have little blurbs about conservation. This is a photo of the African crowned crane. It's found in this area, which is under duress. It's challenges for new road intrusion across the Serengeti, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of choose how little or how much you want to say about it. But again, it kind of goes to this whole idea that we don't need everybody doing it perfectly, or we don't need a few people doing it perfectly. We need a lot of people doing it imperfectly. So anything you can do yourself, any creative ideas you have to tie in conservation with photography is fantastic. So for me, I'm pretty active on Instagram. I do a lot of showcasing my photos there. And I actively do research. It sounds crazy to say, but on hashtags and what things get out there the most. How can I put this photo of an endangered black rhino in front of as many people as possible? How can I compose the text, the copy around it to be intriguing, informative, inspirational, and conservation based? How can I get it out there? I will routinely send my album of trip photos to World Wildlife Fund to publish wherever and however they want, whether it's on the road presentations, virtual presentations, in their magazine, on their online accounts. A lot of conservation organizations need photos for their online accounts. They're under pressure in a good way, to post routinely. And, they may not have a wide collection of digital photos. And some of the big guys, really, like some of the big guy conservation organizations. So you can imagine how much of a need there is for some of the smaller conservation organizations out there to get those materials. And then the last thing I'll say on it is, how you do it really depends on what you are most passionate about. So we all tend to do and like what we do best. So if you really like bears, focus on bears. If you really like coral reefs, focus on coral reefs. If you really like traditional cultures in Asia, focus on that and do it for conservation and do it really well and be creative and have fun while you're doing it.
Yeah, and words to live by. You can apply that to all parts of our lives, right? So many people, are. One thing that I've learned in my journey in over 42 years is, forget about the things that you suck at. You're just going to suck at them. Don't worry about that. Focus on what you love to do. Focus on your strengths and make that even more of a strength and master that. Right. So I want to give people a chance to follow you and connect with you. So do you have a website, an Instagram account? Where can people connect with you that way?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's all under my name. It's court, just like a tennis court, and Whelan, Whelan. So like on Instagram, it's just, first name underscore last name, courtwhelan.com. I also have a photography podcast that's out there, new to late last year. It's the Wild Photographer podcast. It's just kind of like tips and tricks and tutorials on that sort of thing. But yeah, the fortunate thing is the name Court Whelan is pretty Googleable. It's it's not John Smith. There's you pretty much find me if you Google it.
Yeah. We'll include links to all of those things when we send out our follow-up emails. I've got one more question for you before we get into some of the rapid fire. And this is a deeper level question for you, but how has photography changed how you see yourself, maybe how you see other cultures, and how you sort of see the world?
Ooh,
you have 20 minutes. Go.
Yeah. It makes me love it a lot more. It's hard to, there's always this idea that at some point you got to put the camera down and you got to be absolutely present. And I think that's true. I think it's something you absolutely have in the back of your mind, but I also think there's something that actually gets you to be a little bit more immersed in your scene. If you're looking at, the expression, that the eyebrow on that lion, or you're looking at the exact, the cheekbones of that dance performer, and you're like, oh, that's just fantastic. I think it gives me a better appreciation for all of it. And there's of course the permanency that I get to have that memory, not just in my mind, but also on my hard drive forever, and come back to it. And I'm fortunate to do a lot of photography presentations and whatnot. So I get to review stuff often. So it's definitely a deeper connection, deeper appreciation.
Absolutely. And just a quick teaser. We are behind the scenes are working on a series of courses and workshops with some of our coaches, consultants, and experts. And we've been working and hopefully we'll be launching sometime in Q1 of 2021 some photography courses and workshops for people to engage with you, and they can learn more about photography and those kinds of things. So stay tuned for that, and you can get updates on our membership page on our website. Robin, you want to do some rapid fire?
I sure do. Thanks, you guys. This has been a great conversation. So, Court, I have a few questions for you, and we just ask you to answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. So I will start off with this first one. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go? And maybe why?
Ooh,
But keep it short.
I would say I'm very intrigued by Patagonia. I've been in South America pretty extensively. That's my next high hit list item. I'd like to go.
Great. And you've never been?
Yeah, no, I've not been. I've been kind of, in the region, but not the park proper. And there's just very iconic landscapes. And, maybe I'll hop over to Antarctica while I'm down there.
Yeah, may as well. Okay, what is a favorite travel story you have in 30 seconds or less?
Favorite travel story. I will say, let's just talk about each time I get to show someone the Monarch Butterfly migration, which I absolutely love. I'll be with guests that have just trekked gorillas, the season before with me, been in Madagascar and all these crazy places, which just most amazing stuff. And this was a specific instance, but it happens often, is I'll be next to people encountering the butterflies, and they'll look at me and they'll very often have a tear rolling down their cheek, and they'll say, Court, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. The most amazing thing I've ever seen. And I think that maybe that's different for everyone, but it's always fun when you get to be with someone that has that moment.
Yeah. And you've facilitated that for them. That's really special. What's the most interesting or memorable meal that you've had while traveling?
Oh, it's got to be some sort of insect. Yeah, I'll say most memorable, Mexico City. It's funny because, we often revere Mexico as there are next door neighbors. They're sort of familiar because we have a lot of the culture integrated with ours. A lot of the food is intertwined. But there's still things that can really surprise you. And I was at just a very classy, traditional Mexican restaurant in the heart of Mexico City before my group arrived. And, having fantastic guacamole and chips and salsa and sipping a nice little reposado tequila, and things are good. And the guys there know that I'm the guide for the group coming tomorrow, and they're like, do you want to try something muy especial, delicacy? And they bring out 2 plates, one of fried ant eggs and one of like moth larvae. Kind
Wow.
of butter. And for any vegetarians or vegans out there, I apologize, but yeah, it was
Were
just
they messing with you, or like, is that really?
No, so it turns out Mexico as a country eats a lot of insects, and I will say it's one of the more sustainable animal proteins out there. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. It's very, very sustainable. It's actually very nutritious. You fry anything in butter and garlic and it's going to be good. So yeah, it was memorable.
Nice. What book are you reading right now?
Oh, I should go get it because everybody needs to read this. It's called Factfulness. I'm gonna get it because it's that important. It's called Factfulness, and it has been so brilliant for my outlook on life right now. I don't know if this is reversed on the screen, but it looks like this. Super good. It's 10 reasons why we're wrong about the world and why things are better than you think. And it's legit like PhD studies working with the UN and World Health Organization. Fascinating. Everybody needs to pick it up.
Cool. Michael's already got it on order. I'm sure.
It's already on my bookshelf.
Oh, of course. Even better.
It's not. I'm just joking.
Okay, I have a couple more. So complete this sentence. So one thing I never travel without is blank.
Earplugs.
I feel like somebody else said that too recently.
Gotta get my sleep.
Yeah. Okay, and last but not least, we all answered this question at the beginning. What's one of your favorite photography moments?
Good. I was thinking about that. Yeah, I mean, I could answer this in such a million different ways, but very, very memorable experience in Borneo a couple of years ago. I love Borneo. It's got big things and small things and all the tropical craziness, monkeys and orangutans and hornbill birds. They're all fantastic, but there's always been this one thing I've wanted to see. And I've been traveling to the region for a while, and it's called a tarsier. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Tarsier, I think. And they look like a little bush baby, like a gremlin. Like basically is what the movie Gremlins is based off of. But they're really cute, but also kind of weird looking. And I encountered one after 15 years of looking for these guys in the region. And it was just like the perfect photographic opportunity. They're nocturnal. It was at night, but it was patient. It was still had a very low light flashlight on it. It was just enough. And I have like, in my opinion, like show-stopping photos of this guy in just a real natural scene. And it was, if you measure favorite photographic moment by like the number and scale of goosebumps and how long they last, like that was definitely it.
Wow. Awesome.
And,
Thank you so much.
Where can we find that photo, or can we find those photos?
I probably posted it. I probably posted it a couple of times on my Instagram account. It's like a black background and it's this little gremlin looking thing. So yeah, check it out there. And I probably have it on my website somewhere too.
Awesome. We'll be sure to do that. And this is the third time we're saying this, but I do have one more question for you. Thinking back on your journey through life, your journey through academics and conservation and photography and travel and all of that, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Golly, keep on trucking. No, I feel very, very, very fortunate that I'm in a place where I really want to be. And I think it was a lot of serendipity, but I think advice for my younger self or advice for others out there, maybe one of the best things that kind of led me to this is, do what you're passionate about. Like that's what matters most. You're going to like it better. You're going to stick with it longer. You're going to be better at it. The rest of the stuff will come, but figure out what you're passionate about. I think travel is a great way to do that. And yeah, find your passion, explore your passion, and let your passion kind of be your guiding light.
It's Joseph Campbell holds a special place in my little heart, and follow your bliss, right? And Alan Watts and Paulo Coelho and others have said similar things. So totally agree with you. Court, we're going to wrap it here, man, but thank you so very much for being here. It's been a blast. So we'll be sure to share all of this on all of our feeds and follow up with everyone with all the links and all the emails and all of that. Robin and Amanda, thank you guys very much. And for next week, we have our good friend Hannah Gresser on. She'll be here at noon next Wednesday, noon Pacific time next Wednesday, talking about how we can turn trials into treasures in our lives. So again, if you have questions for Court, court@explorer-x.com. General questions for us, hello@explorer-x.com. Follow us on social @GoExplorerX. We'll send all of Court's contact information, Instagram, website, photography, all that stuff in an email following this. And on behalf of our entire team, Court, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Court.
See you, everybody.
Thank you.